Hello, hello, hello. Emergency trade coming through, blah, blah, blah. Emergency Liberty Blue Pod episode going live. Just posting on Twitter and Blue Sky that the trade is official and that we're streaming. Just going to talk briefly, not too long, 15, 20 minutes about the JT Miller trade, what it means, all that. I'm not going to go that in depth on JT Miller because, frankly, I did an episode about JT Miller not that long ago, and I my thoughts are pretty well known at this point. Okay, the official trade details are coming through now. We'll see. Miller. Twitch for about 20-30 minutes. Okay. So, tweet is out. So, let's get the YouTube link. Blah, blah, blah. Keep coming as people trickle in. It's good to see people. It's good to see people. I, for one, am not that hung up on this. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to be very straightforward about this. It's not going to sound exciting. It's not going to sound fun. But this GM is desperate now. Chris Drury knows the expectation is that the Rangers are going to make the playoffs every year. Drury knows the expectation is that the Rangers are supposed to be a Stanley Cup caliber team. And as the first 50 some odd games of this regular season are going, has shown the Rangers are not that. As of today, as we sit here, the Rangers are currently on pace for, wait, I wrote it down. I was doing something earlier I was working on. The Rangers are on pace for 86 standings points right now. The Rangers are on pace for 86 standings points. The team in the second wild card spot right now, which I want to say is, I think is it still Ottawa? No, I don't think it's still Ottawa. Ottawa's up to third in the Atlantic. Right now it's Columbus. Columbus has 57 points in 51 games. The Rangers have 52 points in 50 games. The Rangers are on pace for 86 standings points. And I don't think that JT Miller does all of that much to help them there. And JT Miller stream live for 15-20 minutes. There's the Twitch link and then the YouTube link. Just getting them over on Blue Sky as well. Okay, so now as people trickle in, we can keep this conversation going. But by and large, I think this is the general manager really wanting to try and do anything. And I have said this to a few of my friends, and I'll say it again now. I think Chris Drury is tired of the guys on his team. I think he's tired of Zibanejad, of Kreider, of Panarin. I think people forget that after that Devils series, it was pretty widely reported that Chris Drury would trade Panarin if he could have after that first round series against the Devils went so poorly. Of course, he didn't have the means to do that, but I think this is a way for Chris Drury, who we know is an abrasive, direct, old school personality. You know, you can point to the handling of Kako this year, the way they handled Kratsov, the yelling match they got into during a practice that wasn't Chris Drury's practice. You add all of that up, and Chris Drury, the way he's conducted himself and carried himself throughout his NHL career, where he won the Stanley Cup as a rookie, was a pretty good player as a rookie on that Avalanche team way back in 2001. But Chris Drury looks at the guys on the team and thinks they're soft, they don't try that hard, they don't have what it takes to win. And that's why he has emphasized guys like Sammy Blais and Barclay Goodrow and Ryan Reeves and Patrick Nemeth and Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko and Blake Wheeler. It's why he has time after time gone after these guys who he thinks play the game a certain way. And make no mistake here, this is a general manager who is very insular. When we had Molly Walker on the show last year after the trade deadline, she was very direct in saying that Chris Drury has his one or two people he takes input from, and that's really it. We had that Vince Mercogliano report back in December about the Rangers weaning out the front office and different departments around the organization to people that Chris Drury felt were disloyal and not people he could trust. And now you have a locker room and a group of guys that very clearly don't buy what's going on around them. And this is Chris Drury's way. And look, I don't think Chris Drury is trading for JT Miller with the express written idea that JT Miller is going to come in here, be a hard ass, and drag the rest of the group into the fight more. But that's kind of how this trade is striking me. To me, this feels like the Rangers adding a guy who has an abrasive, difficult personality. And look, I will be fair. JT Miller, the JT Miller that was a Ranger all those years ago, that more than one of my friends told me when they met him, he was rude, he was short, he didn't really care that fans wanted to talk to him, whatever. That's a long time ago. People change, people mature. He's had kids, he's gotten married. I can be reasonable enough to say that time has gone by. But if you read Vancouver writers, and I read Thomas Strands pretty regularly in The Athletic, he said the way he describes JT Miller is a conduit for what goes on around him. Last year, when the Canucks were really good, he was an incredible player. He's over 100 points, one of the best two-way players in the sport. This year, things have gone very bad for the Vancouver Canucks, and JT Miller has amplified that, and the vibes have not been great around that team. And I don't think JT Miller is getting brought in here to be Chris Drury's proxy in the locker room. I think that just happens to be one of the trickle down effects of this transaction, is that you are getting a guy who Chris Drury looks at and sees himself in. Chris Drury looks at JT Miller and says, this is a guy who's like me. He plays the way I do. He cares the way I do. He's going to drag this group that isn't showing heart and isn't showing effort into the fight and make them play better. I, for one, am skeptical of that, because one guy is not going to change anything, which has been a recurring theme of Liberty Blue for all 3 seasons of this show, that this team is what it is. Mika Zibanejad's 30-something, Trocheck's 30-something, Kreider, Panarin. You are not going to materially change how all of those guys play. Those are established NHL veterans who all have more than 10 years of experience at this. All right, Panarin I think has 9 because he came over late, but you get what I'm saying here. How are you going to tell Artemi Panarin, hey, I need you to do this for us, guys? And look, I don't even want to get into the long-term, the financials, the roster planning stuff, because I already think the Rangers are really screwed as far as roster planning. Like, I know there are a lot of people out there who expect the cap increases to pay for everything. That's the justification I've dismissively gotten for why it's okay to pay Will Borgen to be a third pair right-handed defenseman for $4 million for 5 years. The cap will pay for it. Look, you can't have 20 some odd $million tied up in Zibanejad, Trocheck, and JT Miller going forward. You can't. All 3 of those guys are over the age of 30. And look, if you want to say, well, Zibanejad's going to move to the wing and JT Miller's going to play. Okay, who's the third line center? Who's the third line center? You traded Philip Hedl. Who is the third line center if you are going to play Zibanejad on the wing and you're going to go JT Miller, Trocheck down the middle? And look, I want to be fair to the player JT Miller because he is a gifted hockey player. That's not the question here. The question is, why are the Rangers still trying to win the Stanley Cup in a season where they are going to be playing Will Borgen, Ukko Vakanainen, and Ryan Lindgren? And look, there are probably more trades to be made. I still think it would be prudent to trade Ryan Lindgren before the trade deadline. But how are you trading for JT Miller in a season where you're probably going to have to get a new first pair left defenseman to replace Lindgren, or at the very least, another top 4 defenseman, because if after this year, but all of this is just so befuddling to me. I do not understand what the goal is anymore. I wrote something for my Substack today that was titled, Will Borgen Extension Reflects Rangers' Lack of Direction. The Rangers don't have a direction right now. They have 4, now 5 veteran forwards that are going to be 32 years old when the season's over, all making decent money. JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck, and Mika Zibanejad are all under contract through 2028 and further. How are you going to build a contender around 3 centers over the age of 30 that are and look, yes, the cap is going to go up. Those numbers are going to become more palatable as time passes. That's reasonable. I can understand that part of it. The team needs to overhaul. Zibanejad and Trocheck are not good enough. You saw what happened when they played Barkov last year. You saw what happened when Zibanejad went up against Braden Point, Tony Cirelli 3 years ago. We know Zibanejad is not a 1C on a Stanley Cup team. We know JT Miller is not a 1C on a Stanley Cup team. We know Vincent Trocheck is not a 1C on a Stanley Cup team. And look, I hate getting this mad. I genuinely am so tired of it. This general manager has consistently burned assets and burned futures for marginal improvements. You know, what do the Rangers have in front of them? They have, let me do the math here. The Rangers are at 50 games played. That means they have 32 games to go. They can win as many as 64 standings points in the standings. To make the playoffs, they are going to need to have probably close to a 630 points percentage the rest of the way. 630. This is a team that through 50 games is at 520. We are talking about 110% increase in points that's not right. 110 points percentage increase here, going from 520 to 630. That is a steep improvement from where they're at. You know, we're talking 60% of the points, and this team has barely been over 500 for good stretches of the season. And you can tell me, well, JT Miller's going to help them with this. Where is he playing? Who is he playing with? Are you going to break up Trocheck, Panarin, and Lafreniere? Okay. Who's playing with who? What are the fits here? Because again, very reminiscently of trading for Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko, JT Miller doesn't fill a lineup need. He fits a perception need. JT Miller's tough. He's rugged. He's physical. He has an attitude. He's American. All things that Chris Drury has over-prioritized in his tenure as general manager. And look, I'm sure there are sarcastic people who are going to click into this and go, why is he overreacting? JT Miller's a good player. That's great. I'm just tired of doing this, man. These are avoidable mistakes. These are unforced errors. And that's the thing. These are unforced errors. And it's truly mind-boggling to see why the organization is consistently missing the forest for the trees. You know, the comparison I made for giving Will Borgen a 5-year deal was the Rangers had the check engine light come on, and that was going 5 and 15, and they replaced the wheel cover on the steering wheel. Adding JT Miller to this group while subtracting Filipino is like giving yourself spinning rims, but taking off the exhaust. Like, yeah, sure, we got spinning rims. The car looks cooler now. JT Miller doesn't materially change the team all that much. You know, he's got some useful skills. I don't think he's bad, but committing again to a group that just doesn't have the juice. It doesn't have the goods. They've ran Zibanejad as a number one center quite a bit in my life now. I have seen him time after time when matched up against a better center or equal. He has wilted. He has folded. You look last year against Barkov. You look in playoff series. You look at that series against Pittsburgh 3 years ago, first round series. Go look at the box score. Go look at the box scores for the scoring chances and the expected goals for Zibanejad and Crosby head to head. Yeah, JT Miller's better than Zibanejad right now. JT Miller's better than Trocheck right now. But you didn't get out of either of those contracts. And I'm at a point now where it's hard to care. The general manager doesn't understand the problem with his team. He doesn't. You can look at this roster and say, well, they're not scoring enough and they need to play better defense. Is JT Miller going to help them score more? Probably a little bit, especially at 5-on-5. He does have a track record of being good at that, especially last year. Is he going to make Ukko Vakanainen better? Going to make Braden Schneider better? Going to make Ryan Lindgren better? Probably not. And that's the Rangers' issue right now. The Rangers' defense is so unbelievably bad on a nightly basis in terms of volatility. And look, yes, during that 10-game stretch, they were playing better defense. They were conceding less, expected goals, high danger chances. All of that is true. You saw what happened when they played Colorado and Carolina. You saw what happened when they played teams who can sun them. And yes, they controlled the game against Colorado. That's great. Colorado's got better players. That's the end of the discussion for me. You cannot tell me the Rangers are even the best team in their own division with JT Miller. You adding JT Miller to this team that's on pace for 86 standings points does not make you better than the Devils. It does not make you better than Carolina. It does not make you better than Washington. It might make you better than the Islanders. On paper, the Rangers are better than the Islanders. On paper, the Rangers are better than a lot of the teams that are ahead of them right now. In terms of just the wild card, the Rangers on paper are better than Montreal. They're better than the Islanders. They're better than the Red Wings. They're better than the Bruins. They're better than the Blue Jackets. But as we all know, hockey is not played on paper. And the results the Rangers have given you for the first 50 games of the regular season would tell you this is not a particularly good iteration. Shesterkin has been fine. Adam Fox has been very good. Beyond that, there's not a lot here that's exciting. Will Cooley had a nice first 2 months. Then they started playing him with Zibanejad, and he stopped being as effective. Zibanejad and Kreider are on pace to be the worst versions of themselves. I want to get this right. I put a graphic in that Will Borgen thing, so I want to read it real quick, but blah, blah, blah. Where is it? So last year, Trocheck had 77 points. This year, he's on pace for 53. Last year, Kreider had 75. He's on pace for 33. Last year, Zibanejad had 72. He's on pace for 48. JT Miller is a good hockey player. He might be able to cajole slightly better performances out of this team. But if you have even a cursory understanding of probability, which the Rangers very clearly don't, you can't give up what they just gave up to try and improve your odds of just making the playoffs 1 or 2%. You know, the Rangers took 3 steps back from where they were last year in terms of just contender status, let alone where they are in the standings, where they went from Stanley Cup contender to like bubble playoff team in one off season, and mostly because the vibe deteriorated. I don't think you're putting the tube back. You're not putting the toothpaste back in the tube with this group. You're not. You can try valiantly, but we've seen how this group has responded to adversity this year. And JT Miller is not exactly the most chipper friendly guy who's going to be the right person to push the right buttons. In a room that has a leadership void, that frankly has an accountability void, adding a guy who forced his way out of his third team is probably not going to be the best vibe. And look, I don't know JT Miller. I don't know the situation. But watching a team where Kakko, Zach Jones, Jimmy Vesey all felt emboldened enough that their direction with the team was not in their favor to go out on the record. And for someone, and look, this is how I know something's wrong. When the Rangers signed Jimmy Vesey 3 years ago to that PTO, I came on this show with Andrew and I said to you, this feels like a favor. This feels like the Rangers doing nice by a guy they like. And if he makes the team, great. If not, no harm, no foul. Then like 3 months into that season, Drew gave him a 3-year deal for $800,000 a year. And look, the money wasn't the thing, but Chris Drury threw Jimmy Vesey a lifeline when Jimmy Vesey was barely an NHLer. For Jimmy Vesey to go on the record and say, I feel directionless and I don't feel like I'm being valued, that tells me something's wrong here. And maybe it's just as simple as communication. Maybe it's just as simple as, hey, Peter Laviolette's not sitting down with these guys, whether it's Jones, whether it's Vesey, to give them an understanding of what the expectations are, how they can get back in the lineup. You know, I know there were a lot of people who were sarcastically saying yesterday, well, it's not like Kaliev's played amazing. It's not like Kaliev deserves to stay in. That's not the point. Guys like Brodzinski should have been playing all year. Brodzinski's a better hockey player than Matt Rempe. Jimmy Vesey is a better hockey player than Matt Rempe. But we know the Rangers do not run a meritocracy. Filipino couldn't get more minutes than Mika Zibanejad. Filipino couldn't get more minutes than Vincent Trocheck. Will Cooley couldn't get more minutes than Chris Kreider. The Rangers don't run a meritocracy. And I know my Islander fan friends have referred to the Islanders as a country club for a while now, where the veterans are happy, they all get their money, nobody ever gets held accountable because everyone's already getting paid, and there's no way to motivate a group that's already got what they want. And fundamentally, I don't think there's cajoling anything more out of this group. Can the results be more consistent? Yeah. I think if you add JT Miller to a team, as long as he doesn't entirely tank the vibe, he'll help the hockey results. But you're telling me this team that's played 520 hockey all year is going to suddenly start playing miraculously better because they added a guy who's slower. Like, anybody who has watched the Rangers this year knows that Filipino is their only dynamic center in terms of skating ability. The only one who's going to put pressure on defenses, who's going to carry the puck through the neutral zone. And you got rid of that for what? You got rid of that for what? I fundamentally I don't get what the point is here. I fundamentally do not get what the point is. Mancini, whatever. I don't think Mancini is anything of concern for the Rangers, especially considering they gave Borgen that contract. They already got 3 righties. That's more than adequate. I don't think Mancini was anything that would have made a difference in the next year or two. Maybe down the road, he's a little bit more of consequence, but the protected first rounder, that doesn't matter a whole lot. That's going to be in the mid-teens or late 20s. I don't really... I really don't get it, man. I really don't get what the Rangers are trying to do here. The Rangers are going to have $22 million tied up in Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, and Vincent Trocheck. $22 million tied up in all 3 of those guys until 2029. Please tell me how the Rangers are supposed to get Connor McDavid next summer, or Jack Eichel next summer, or Mikko Rantanen this summer, when you have that much money tied up in guys who aren't as good. Fundamentally, when you have gotten to the playoffs, the Rangers' trump card is that their best players have beat the guys they've been up against. And the Pittsburgh series in 21, that's an outlier. That is an outlier because that series, Sidney and Crosby outplayed Zibanejad, and you can make an argument Malkin outplayed Ryan Strome. The Rangers still won that series. Then, when it got to the Carolina series, Zibanejad, he outplayed Sebastian Aho. That was good enough. And then they got to Tampa Bay. And Braden Point, Tony Cirelli, they're about that action against the Devils. Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, they body-bagged Trocheck and Zibanejad. Then last year, they handled Dylan Strome and co. very easily. They handled Aho and co. very easily. And then they got to Barkov. And you know that joke that's a Chrysler looks like a Phantom until a Phantom pulls up? That's what Zibanejad next to Barkov is. Because you look at the people who cover the Rangers, people like Arthur Staple, who say Zibanejad is a Selke caliber defender. He should have been a Hart Trophy finalist. Sasha Barkov is what a Selke caliber center looks like. Sasha Barkov is what a Hart Trophy caliber center looks like. Don't be accepting of mediocrity. The Rangers are asking you to pay $120 to go to a hockey game just to get in the door, to sit with the Billy Joel and the Harry Styles banners. $120 just to get in. And then every beer is $17 and every hot dog is $9. It's not fun right now. This is not a worthwhile experience. I have yet to go to a Ranger game this year, and I don't know if I will. I don't think I care. It's not worth it right now. This team is a mess. I don't agree with the direction of the team because there isn't one. Are we trying to win right now? Are we? Okay. Then why are we playing Rempe over Vesey? Why are we playing Rempe over Brodzinski? Why couldn't Filipino get more minutes? All of this is infuriating if you're watching this as somebody who just wants to see the team win. That's the most frustrating part of this. The Rangers are desperately trying to make the playoffs this year. For what reason? So you can play Florida in the first round? Toronto? Okay. You could play Toronto in the first round? Great. Maybe you beat Toronto. But man, why are you burning Chytil, who you had under contract at a reasonable price? And look, if you want to say, hey, Chytil's injury concerns, they were able to get out of the contract, sure. But JT Miller is not raising the ceiling on this group. He might raise the floor a little bit, but man, the Rangers are almost entirely beholden to a group that is underperformed. You know, I can live with the Shesterkin extension. I can live with the Fox extension. Beyond that, why are you paying Zibanejad what you're paying him? Why are you paying Kreider? Why are you paying Panarin? Time after time, when the chips are down, those guys have disappointed you. But it's a Friday night. I know people have more important things to do than listen to me go through the stages of grief and watch my psychosis get worse. Full episode on Monday with Andrew. We'll talk about the game tomorrow against the Bruins, which is going to be an absolute... The ESPN coverage of that game is going to be such an abomination. I'm going to watch the entire thing on mute because I'm sure Mark Messier is going to go on some great soliloquy about how JT Miller reminds him of himself, and PK Subban is going to talk about all kinds of nonsense, and Ferraro and Sean McDonough, who sound like they're calling the game with the enthusiasm of people waiting at the DMV. Everyone have a safe and